be talking about this afternoon is fundraising. Now, first of all, major apologies. There's been some communications problems, apparently. Everyone here should have gotten 2 emails to explain what your homework was. Everyone had pre-reading that they were supposed to do. And apparently, in this morning's session, no one received it. So, apologies for that. We're having problems with MailChimp or direct emails. We're still trying to figure out why this happened. But the bottom line is, everyone had homework they were supposed to do before showing up today. You were supposed to read the fundraising boot camp that you've got there, and you were supposed to bring your income statement. So, oh well, we'll wait. That's what happens with live presentations. So, apologies for that. So, why are we structuring today the way it is? Well, because this is how I deal with a typical mass client. The typical mass client, I flip both marketing and fundraising. So there's sort of 4 steps. So step 1, when I start working with a client, is I fix up their website. Messaging is clean, all their information is set, done. Step number 2, and sorry, step number 1 is what we talked about this morning. Step number 2 is I flip over away from marketing and over to fundraising, and at that point we start making a plan and we start talking about the revenue efficiency report. That's what we're going to do this afternoon. And just for your information, as a normal client, step 3 is once at the end of today you'll know what your target donors are, what tools you need. Step 3 is making the tools, and that's what we did this morning. And then step 4, for your information, is that I have sort of a tutorial to the fundraising subcommittee. And what I do is the ED is sort of the good cop and I'm the bad cop, and I come in here and I say, come on, here's what you do. You got your tools, you got your donors, go for it, go. So that's how I deal with a typical client. So that's how we structure this. So a typical client, I work for about 25 hours. So how do you squeeze 25 hours into 6 hours? Well, what I've done is the certain difficult bits. A lot of the difficult bits were this morning. So hopefully for those morning participants, the hard part is over. So now we're going to talk about the hard parts of fundraising. When I deal with a typical mass client, when it comes to their fundraising side, typically they have volunteers that are enthusiastic, passionate, but they have no structure. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know what are their elevator speeches. They don't know how to communicate with other volunteers so that everyone knows what we're doing. They don't know the tools. They don't have like donor letters or templates and that. So they don't have the structure, but they have the passion. So I come along and I work with the ED and we create the plan and the tools and that, and then we present so that the team has structure to channel the passion. So what we're going to do is develop the structure. The objective of today's session is to teach you the minimum you need to know about fundraising. Okay, so like entire careers are made on fundraising. If you go to the library, there are shelves of books on fundraising. Do you convert overwhelming? So what I did is I took the stuff and this is the minimum you need to know. You can do a lot more beyond this. But quite typically, most mass clients just want to. Here is what we're going to talk about in our agenda. The 4 sources of revenue. There's no magic to them, but that's just makes it easy for us. Which are your most efficient donors based on the 4 sources? We're going to build 3 inventories, and those are your assignments where you're going to build an inventory and then share your ideas with your table mates so that you can get ideas out there. At the end of those, I'm going to take a few minutes just to bring the inventories together and see how they match together. Then elevator speeches. Such a big deal on elevator speeches. So we're going to talk about them, and we're going to then finally how to manage a fundraising committee. So it's not about the money. Fundraising is not about the money. It's not about the money. It's about time. If you use your time wisely, the money will follow. If you build relationships, the money will follow. It's about time and it's about relationships. It's not about the money. This is what my entire presentation is all about. So let's begin. 4 sources of revenue. Now, foundations, corporations, baby donor. Okay, so from the point of view of the CRA makes a huge big deal about the difference. Like there's apparently 4 different kinds of foundations. of view, don't worry about it, you treat them all the same. So I've lumped them all together. Corporations, a little bit different, so you need volunteers with different skill sets, so we'll separate them. From the CRA point of view, there is no difference between a major donor and a regular donor. They're individuals. But from your point of view, there is an enormous difference because major donors, there's no difference other than major donors like you more. So you treat them the same. So, and again, you need different skill sets. Volunteers need different skill sets according to this. So that's why there's 4 sources of revenue. Now, I'm going to show you, this is a rule of thumb. And I almost didn't want to put this on because I'm going to show you some statistics. Oh, by the way, yes, everything is, there's no, I won't be showing you the deck because everything you need to know is in the white paper which you received. And this chart is in the white paper as well. I'm really reluctant to put this in because first of all, it's not Canadian. Canadian stats don't exist. This is from British University. The other reason is it's not relevant to the typical mass client because this is the entire industry. And in Canada, 85%, yep. You want me to do this over?
Speak up.
Oh, speak up. I'm losing my voice. Okay. 85% of the revenue received in our industry in Canada is by the big charities. And they have acres of staff, they have teams of volunteers, they do all different kinds of fundraising. But to the typical mass client, you don't do that, so don't even try to emulate that. All the rest of us are sharing 15% that's left over. But here we go. Foundations, corporations, and major donors are efficient. Regular donors, oh, that's a real thing. Acquiring a regular donor is really expensive, but retaining one, really cheap. Events, well, we all know that can range, and then government grants. Now, what's interesting, I wanted to bring to your attention 2 things. Most mass clients only go after foundations, corporations, major donors, and government grants. That regular donors and events, so that's like almost 50%. So it's the other ones that you really want to focus on, just because you need infrastructure to do those things. Typical mass client doesn't have that. The other thing that you got to learn about that is look at renewing existing donors. They are so efficient, it's only 5%. But there's such churn in the industry that once you get this expensive donor, you want to keep it, and you lose them. Yes?
Sorry, the percentages are percent of time, percent of money.
Money.
Money spent.
Yep. Okay, let's begin with the first source of revenue. Foundations are charities that pool donations from various donors, and they must pay out a certain amount every year. Now again, the CRA cares deeply about these 4 different kinds. Treat them all the same. So how do you find foundations? I just tell my clients to go to the public library, because the public library has purchased this database called Grant Connect, which is National Canada. Go to their website, look at 10 or 15 potential foundations that might suit your needs, and then the Toronto Library will log you out after an hour, and then go home and just start researching the websites. You try and establish some kind of contact. Maybe you can, maybe not. Just phone them up and say, hey, I'm thinking, what do you think? And then you write a proposal. Now, there's usually not a lot of leeway in writing proposals, and we have to fill in the form. So if you're going to assign a volunteer to go after 10 to 15 foundations, what you might want to do is agonize and do a great job on the first one, and then copy and paste. So they're not reinventing the wheel each time. Yes?
Does foundations require a tax deductible receipt? Because I don't know how many organizations here, or basic charitable organizations, we are talking about.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
They care of us, but we can't issue them a money tax receipt. So,
Some do this, some don't.
Oh, okay. So then you write the proposal, assign a skilled person to follow up, but what's really important is keep track of your finance system. got this institutional memory, don't lose it. Remember who you approached and why. Now, if your proposal is successful, thank you. You do what you promised to do, and then you nurture the relationship because you want to renew. If your project is not successful, you do the same thing. So, well, you tell me why. Ask if you want to make changes. Nurture that relationship. You want to try again next year. Corporations. Now, only about 20% of my clients can actually realistically go after corporate sponsorship. Just because corporations want their logo out there. And a lot of, so this may not apply to many people in this room, but we'll go ahead. Corporations have two budgets. So the philanthropic budget, so smaller corporations, they may just do things like matching employee donations, giving time off for volunteer work, or in-kind donations. So the way to get that stuff is approach your donors and say, could you please take this to your HR department and ask for a matching donation, and therefore you double the impact of your donation. For larger corporations, they may do that. As well, they may have a separate sort of philanthropic budget where they go after their corporate social responsibilities. You learn that by your website. So the discussion about the philanthropic budget is sort of an emotional kind of discussion. The discussion about the sponsorship budget is very logical and business-like because it's all about the brand and how you can help the company sell their products. And so that's why it's appealing to arts organizations who are going to have traffic. You're going to have eyeballs, so you can have corporate sponsorship. Or if you're going to have trucks on the road, you can have logos on it. So, and it's all about a corporation from a sponsor will look at you and compare you to any other form of advertising, radio advertising, TV advertising, sponsored nonprofit. So that's what and it's a very logical discussion. How do you do that? Well, you build an inventory. So this afternoon, we're going to be building your inventory of sponsorship opportunities. You research more than double you need. So let's say you know you're going to get an average donation of what, and that means 10. You research 20. And then eventually, because you know 10 will decline, so 10 may approach you. Then you get a meeting or a telephone call. You customize a package. You don't want to ask too early because you do want to understand what their needs are. In this white paper, page 6, is a list of questions that you could ask during that telephone call. Things like, what are your marketing needs? Who's your target audience? What other charities do you sponsor and why? So you want to have this conversation and then build a proposal around the information that you have already learned. So you give the ask. If you're successful, you develop a plan. And if you're not successful, you try again. Whatever it is, you keep track of what you've done so you don't repeat the same mistakes. There used to be this sort of trend that in the past, you were going for corporate sponsorship, you were in tiers, gold, silver, bronze. It's kind of old school now. The thinking now is a la carte. So you make an inventory and you price individually and let the corporation pick and choose what they want. That's the new way of thinking. Okay, major donors. Find leads. We're going to be talking about how to find leads this afternoon. Essentially, though, what you do is if you have an existing donor database, what you do is you figure out your threshold between major donors and regular donors. And so if your major donors are the ones over the threshold, and you treat them differently. We're going to be talking about how to treat them differently. But what you can do is just look at a donor just under the threshold. And those are your leads that you might be able to upgrade. But you have to have a donor database. So what about people who don't have a donor database? Well, you can approach local service clubs. And this morning we were talking about making a presentation that you could get out there as an excuse to get on people's agendas, and then that's when you introduce yourself. So we're going to be talking about that later. So you, in the invitation, set up a follow-up meeting. Okay, so this is for a big major donation. communication, so it might be on a special project that you want to do, you know, like for $20,000 or $30,000. You'd have 2 meetings. You're just asking for $1,000 or $500. You don't even need a meeting at all. But what you want to do is maybe a telephone call, and so you ask their giving needs, like, you know, what other charities do you give to, and what do you like about the charities? What do they do right that you like? You're just trying to understand how that works. Then you Google them, and then follow up, regular contact, we haven't done, and then renew them. Regular donors. Okay, email, e-newsletters. It's the people who were here this morning. I'm not a fan of e-newsletters, but you know, a lot of people do that. I find that they're very impersonal and a lot of time and not a lot of payback. So, one thing about you got to understand about this is really not traditional fundraising to these people. This is traditional marketing. And so you need the skill set of a marketer, not really a fundraiser, because the other ones are one-to-one communication. These ones are one-to-many. So it's traditional marketing. So events. I am really conflicted when a client comes to me and they say, I want to put on an event. Because most clients, their events just break even. And so but the other hand, I do have one of my colleagues at Mass in the fundraising practice area. She is a full-time fundraiser. She is professional, and she works in one of the hospitals. She loves events. And I'm, wow, how do you do this? She thinks differently when it comes to events. Like the typical Mass client, they put on an event, they do all the preparation work, and then they collect the money on the event, and it's done. She doesn't think like that. To her, she does the preparation, she does the event, she's only halfway through. Because when she's at the event, she's networking, she's getting business cards. The next morning, she's got a stack of business cards, she starts working those business cards. Her point of view is that the event has to pay for itself. So all that prep work. But she says her goal is to make just as much money after, by all these business cards, as she made before. Therefore, she doubles her revenue. That's how people do it. They love events. So if you're going to have an event, one of the things that we do for my clients that do that, I set aside, I assign people who put on the event, and then another volunteer entirely does post-event follow-up. And it's so they're not burnt out. And they come, I can't do it. No, they're just, the post-event follow-up volunteer is just starting. And then social media. Okay, let's talk. All the rest of these ones they're available, but they're rarely done by Mass clients. Now I'm going to talk about social media. Okay. I'm going to talk about something that I did not put in the white paper, and I've learned not to say this because people either don't believe me or they think I'm weird, but you paid money, so I'm going to tell you this. I've been volunteering with Mass for 5 years. I've just started my 16th client. And, you know, they're all marketing clients, but about 2/3 of them are fundraising clients. So, how many of those 60 clients have I helped with fundraising? What? You're a marketer. How dare you? Social media is the new thing. It's not, I just don't do it because in consequence of a previous decision. And the previous decision is who is your target audience. So there's the 4 major donors, and then clients recipients for those people in the morning who wanted to get clients coming to the performing arts. Okay, that's your target audience. Now I split them like this because you treat them differently. For these ones on the left, that's the tech in the for-profit world. This is called business-to-business marketing, and that is all about one-to-one communication. So about 50% of my clients are going after those, and by the way, it gets 80% of the revenue. The other 50% of my clients are going on business-to-consumer marketing. This is traditional marketing. 50%, and it's only about 20% of the revenue. So as you can tell right now, that that point alone is quite a discussion. I'm always trying to keep people away from the B2C marketing just because there's so much competition out there and mass clients are tiny. They do not have the infrastructure and the marketing skills to do that effectively. Okay, so what I did is I went through my files and I went, okay, well, what have I done next? I can't remember. Well, here's what I've done on the B2B side. It's all telephone and personal email. You do not Facebook these people. You do not Twitter these people. You have drinks with them. You have coffee with them. You nurture these people. That has not changed in 50 years. But this is what's changed. I've gone through presentations, posters, advertising, like I look at a client and I just say, okay, what makes sense for them? And then I look at the next client. What makes sense for them? You do this all up. One client did social media ever make sense for? I had one client that was in social media and I actually told her to stop because she was wasting her time. So one client. Now, that being said, just about every one of my clients is already on social media. And if they've got advocacy as part of their mission, they're on Twitter and they can teach me Twitter. If they're trying to manage volunteers, they're already on Facebook. They don't need, when it comes to revenue though, I've had one client do social media. Now, I know I'm a marketer, this sounds like I'm sacrilege in that, but why am I saying this? Well, there's sort of two reasons. One is that mass clients are small entities. The big charities, they have the acres of staff, they have the infrastructure to do tweeting, licensing, Facebook, everything. They have the stuff. Don't have the stuff. The typical mass client has less than one person who can do marketing and fundraising. It's usually the ED. They are so stretched. There are low-hanging fruit that are way more effective than social media. The other thing is, from a sort of university academic theory, what social media has done is it has replaced what used to be called public relations. Back 10 years ago, PR jobs were viable careers for graduates, and there was broadcast media. Broadcast media has been decimated now. So PR kind of doesn't exist anymore, and it's been replaced by social media. But the thing is, though, that if you were having this conversation 10 years ago, I wouldn't be recommending that my clients get into PR, so why should I recommend they get into social media? So there it is. You can go ahead and think I'm weird, but one client out of 6 did social media make sense. Let's move on. So you want to have a fundraising subcommittee, and you need to recruit. Oh, just wait a second. I forgot this part. I just read it. I was listening to back to the there is a blogger who's really famous in this field. Her name is Heather Mansfield. She's got a blog called Nonprofit Tech for Good. If you're gonna seriously get into social media, you've got to sign up for her blog. It's just great. So I started following her 5 years ago, and 5 years ago, blah blah blah, here's social media, got lots of free publicity on it. I listened to her webinar in December, 1 month ago. Let me quote what she said. There is so much clutter in social media that the only way to get attention is to pay for ads in social media channels. Yep. Yes.
Can you repeat her name again, please?
Oh, Heather that's her name. Heather Mansfield. But it's actually Nonprofit Tech for Good. You look in her archives, she's got so much stuff in there. I've learned so much from her. She's amazing. But isn't that interesting how she's changing her tune now? Okay, sorry, I forgot what. Okay, you want a fundraising subcommittee. So you want to recruit a variety of skills. Now, what we're going to do, the first assignment, is to figure out which of these donors you want to go after. So for the small nonprofits, don't try to go after all 4 of them. It's just going to be too overwhelming. So what you want to do is pick the one you want and then recruit for that skill set. So overall, the foundation skill set, the skill set you need for volunteers to do foundation work is really sort of an at-home computer researchy kind of person that likes to work at their own pace and their own time. When it comes to corporations and major donors, that's the typical sales, outgoing people person who's great listening skills and work really, really well. And then when it comes to regular donors, you're looking for traditional marketing skills. anyone who's been in the marketing and for-profit world can do that kind of stuff. And you need tools. So for the people who were here this morning, we've got a new website, brochure, printed handouts, PowerPoint presentation, and sample donor letters. For those people who weren't here this morning, got some homework to do, because your subcommittee needs those tools. What we're going to talk about next is the 3 elevator speeches, that's today, and then some kind of a donor database and a prospecting database. We're going to talk about those 2 today. And then, I'm not going to talk about it, but you need to have accounting. If you're not going to use Canada Helps, you have to have good accounting and gift acceptance policies. So, okay. Tiny nonprofits, pick one activity and do it well. Okay, so I know that this whole 3 hours is going to be overwhelming for you because I'm going to be talking about all of them. I do not expect tiny nonprofits to do them all. Pick one and stick to your guns, do it well. After a few years, pick another one. What I'm going to talk about in this white paper, the first bit is sort of fundraising 101, the minimum you need to know. The appendix, though, is a sample fundraising plan. So when I work with a client, I actually create a fundraising plan that is their own. So the first thing I do is I put their names down, and the members start choosing what areas they're going to do. Because I have found that if your name is on a document, you'll get a lot of attention to that document. You can read this at your own pace later on, but I wanted to bring you to the attention of page 17, which are the tactics. So when if I am a volunteer that's going after corporations' acquisitions, these are the steps I follow. 1, 2, 3. Doesn't that sound logical and easy and so straightforward? The reality is, though, the next page. Because, so here we go. Great. Volunteer 1. So I'm volunteer 1. So in May I do those things. In June I do these things. In July I do these things. But the reality is that, oh well, something didn't work. So I'll continue on with one of them, but the other 3 declined, so I'm going to start all over again. The next thing you know, this is a plate of spaghetti. And you've got a fundraising subcommittee, various people, all at different stages. It's just a nightmare. You have to keep some kind of a database to keep track. In the version here, this is way too much. This is okay for medium-sized nonprofit, but for the small ones, this is what I do. Usually it's just a Google spreadsheet so that everyone can have access to it. And every week they do whatever their volunteer work and then they summarize it in there. So each row is a prospect information. Then on April 1 I did some research. On May 1 I sent the letter. June 1. So what happens is that if something ever happens to our volunteer called Abby, another volunteer can take over and not lose it. This is an asset that is valuable. It's an intangible asset, but it is valuable. And there's nothing, so there's turnover, but also there's nothing more awkward than volunteer Betty deciding, oh, I know James Bond, I'm going to approach him. Now suddenly one donor is being approached by 2 volunteers. It's so awkward. Again, you need to keep the momentum going of your fundraising subcommittee. So have monthly meetings, and the first item on the agenda is fill that in. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. Spend 5 minutes, go around the table. How many people researched foundations? 2 people, done. How many people researched corporation form? Done. It takes 5 minutes. The reason why you want to do this is that this is your institutional memory. Once, after you've done this every month, after you have 12 of these now you know how much time your volunteers have spent, so you can calculate what the efficiency is. You also know how many prospects you've done and what your acceptance ratio is. So if you know you've approached 15 foundations and you've been successful with 5, you got a 3-to-1 ratio. That's your ratio. So next year, when you're going to start doing your planning and your budgeting, okay, we need to have 7 foundation supplies. So that means I need 20, to approach 21, because I just know my ratio was 3 to 1. Yes?
The foundation operations differentiate between start work and volunteers.
Okay. Now how are we doing? All right, so now we're going to get into the revenue efficiency report. Why do you want to do this? Stop wasting time. Figure out who are your most effective donors and go after them. Here's a sample of the simplest version I've ever done. So the first column is, well, the sources of revenue. By the way, you're going to be filling in one of these in about 10 minutes. So the second column is revenue, so you just get that from your most recent income statement. Volunteer hours. This is so funny. Every time I talk to a client, I say, oh, come on, just guess. They say, oh, no, I have no idea. Oh, it's okay, just don't worry. You can always change it later. Just guess. Okay, the ED column. So I write it, okay. And then a week later, I say, okay, do you want to change it? Oh, no, it's fine, it's fine. So an ED's guess is good enough. You don't need to be accurate on this one. This is management accounting. This is not financial accounting. You will not show this to your auditors. You will not show it to the CRA. You will show it to your board of directors to make decisions. So you do this to the point where you're happy with the decision and that further information will not change that decision. So all this is just revenue by hours. That's all it was. And then the most important thing is the arrows, because that's what you want to do next year. Here are the things to go with. This was an actual one. I showed it to a client. Her first thing was, I'm going to stop spending so much time on this. So how do I, this is the most simple version. I'm going to show you a bit more, and they're going to get more complicated and more complicated. All right, the next one, do you see how there's no costs? Because these people didn't have costs. So what I'm going to do is put a new third column called costs. So, and this is an example of a client who had pretty significant costs. But everything else is the same. Then you still got the time. Again, it's an estimate. Now this is on dollar amounts. The previous one was in hours. And then the difference here is that you see how the revenues and costs, it's not an actual, it's just words. Low, medium, high. All you want is a direction where you're going to go. And when I showed this to a client, she had a sense of relief. She said, oh, I've been trying to convince my board to stop doing these events, and I could never convince them. And this was the tool she needed to convince her board to change. So EDs know this. They just may not have the tool to show it. So the next one I'm going to show is, we're going to split see how there's one column there for the arrows? The next one's going to have 2. So this is cost, and again, just words for the efficiency. Now, the reason why we had to split the columns here is that this is an example of a client who's been existing for 5 years, and it was one volunteer who was doing it, and she was getting burnt out. She knew she had to start transitioning off because she couldn't take it anymore. But she knew it would take a few years. So what she wanted to do was that she was willing to do the ED column, but she wanted to start developing this fundraising subcommittee. So that next year she would do less foundations and corporate sponsorship, and the committee would take that over. She'll do this again next year, and she will have more down arrows. The committee will have more up arrows, and it might take her 2 or 3 years, but then she'll be off the bus. That's why we needed the two columns. The next one I'm going to show you has lots of detail on the source of revenue column, the first column, because they have institutional members. They knew how many foundations they had, what the average cost was. And what's interesting is this client, this is as far as I got it. And then after I said goodbye, the next step for them was that they were going to redo this, take away all the arrows, and replace it with dollar targets. So not only would a volunteer have to take on responsibility, they will have personal dollar targets to raise for the year. Not every nonprofit is ready to take on that kind of detail. Any questions on the revenue efficiency report?
What page of the handbook is that?
Sorry?
What page of the handbook is that?
Those are actual examples. They're not in the handout. It's in the appendix. So what we're going to do is the first assignment, you're going to make your own revenue efficiency report. So we're going to take 20 minutes to make your own. So you can, if there are people from the same nonprofit, you can please work together and just make one. So you make one, and then you've got 10 minutes, and then this will date, and then you've got 10 minutes to share it with a partner. Now, for the purposes of presenting to your board of directors, yes, you need to have all these columns filled in. Yes. For the purposes of right now, the next 20 minutes, all you need to do is put in the directions and the arrows, because the rest of today will be based on where your arrows are pointing. So when you're in your 10 minutes of sharing with your partner, you say where the arrows are pointing and why.
Are we doing where our organization is today?
Yeah, oh yeah, okay.
Or
good.
where we want it to go next year?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. So for people with income statements and organizations that have been existing for a while, this is a summary of 2016, where you were. The arrows point to where you want to be in the future, 2017. For small organizations that don't have a history and don't have an old income statement, well, all you've got is your future budget. So that would be, you fill in where you want to be in the columns, if you're tiny. Good question. Okay, please start. You've got 20 minutes to make your own version of this.